I did speak to Ms. Dodge at BCAT. They're having a technical issue right now, so the broadcast is not on Facebook and it's not on public television. She's
Okay.
hoping within a few minutes. She is texting me back and forth, so she'll give me an update.
Okay.
I just got a message that says, I got it. It'll be up soon.
Okay, that's
So-
great.
If we can all hold on a couple more minutes, it should be good.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, next item on our agenda is the coronavirus update. Before we get to that, I would just like to take a moment to, I noticed, I happened to notice today that someone, several people actually that I know from town have passed away recently, some from the coronavirus, sadly. And I just wanted to take a minute, not to name names, there's too many people dying to go there, but I would like to take a moment of silence for all of the people who have died from this horrible illness, and especially for those members of our community that have been lost. Okay, thank you. I'm sure I can speak for the committee when I say condolences to all families in the community that are suffering with this. Eric, can we go to you now for the update?
Yes, ma'am, and I'll try to drag some different folks in. We just, since our last meeting,
Hang on, Eric. Hang on, Eric. What is it, Martha?
I got a request from Adam to.
Is he on the meeting? We'll go back to that when Martha reads. What is it, Martha?
I got a request from Adam Nessie to participate in public.
How's he going to do that? Was he on the meeting?
I don't know. He said. Sure. Oh, he says he's muted. Hold on. We'll go back, or.
Yeah, you can go back.
The network too. What's your question? I'll check.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Now we can.
Oh, okay. So just expanded on what Ms. Vitucci and Mr. Souza just discussed. First, my family loves this program, and I definitely want to see these people who work in the program taken care of in some capacity. My wife and I are still working, and I want to see as many people working as possible.
We do have the broadcast working.
But I do agree families are under great stress. As you know, a lot of themes that I hit on at town meetings and when I talk, it's about transparency. I understand that you took a vote that was related to this decision in an indirect fashion back on Friday, March 13th. During an emergency meeting. At the time, we thought that the decision was only going to be for 2 weeks. I think that at some point, just in the interest of transparency to the families, to the teachers that are looking at it and increasingly shrinking revenue stream coming into the school, I think it's worth taking an up or down roll call vote, as the original vote on the 13th never appeared in an agenda anywhere.
Adam, what vote are you talking about?
On March 13th, the school committee took one vote, and that one vote was determined to pay all of the per diem and hourly employees for the duration of the shutdown. At the time, we thought the shutdown was only going to be 2 weeks. I just think in the interest of transparency, it's worth taking that vote again at a date in the future where it's posted on an agenda somewhere.
Well,
okay.
Thanks for bringing that to our attention. Dr. Conti, if you feel we should take another vote when timelines are updated, please put it on the agenda.
Yeah, okay, Madam Chair, we can certainly, I guess, reaffirm that vote for the extended closure. So I can get that on the next agenda.
Okay, that's good. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Dr. Conti, on the update now.
Since our last meeting, I'm having a little bit of trouble keeping track of when our last meeting was, but since our last meeting, the governor has extended the school closure. This is old news to everybody, but not since our last school committee meeting, through the end of the year. And the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has released modified guidelines to cover the closure to the end of the year. Our last day is still scheduled to be Friday, June 19th. The most immediate response with the extended closure came from high school seniors and the parents of high school seniors who obviously were expressing a sense of loss at some of the celebrations and life events that happen this time of year during senior year. We're all going to be feeling that loss. I know Mark Sullivan, Principal Sullivan, is working with a group of at the high school and is trying to come up with some modified celebrations or some rescheduled celebrations. I know that he's also working across the Middlesex League with all the high schools to see if there are other good ideas that are coming up. We know that we're going to be compared to one another, so we're trying to get ahead of that, those conversations a little bit, and just try to know what's going on. I know with my conversations with colleagues, no one has a definitive plan yet for what to do with seniors, but we're all working on it and all sort of want to make sure that we create some way of making this time of year special for those kids. I think the beginning part of this week was in the sort of the ending of last week was just dealing with the extended closure. The new guidance from the Department of Ed is 25 pages long. And I know Patrick and I have been going through it. Patrick's been meeting with the instructional coaches. We had a meeting with principals this morning. And we've been making adjustments to our remote learning plan in 2-week blocks of time. So we have a plan that is through the original reopening date of May 4th. And we're putting a plan together that reflects the new guidelines from the state and would take us through the end of the year. So I think that's what's going on. Patrick is still communicating daily with staff, and we're trying to share best practices. We're trying to make sure that all the students are connected with every day. And there's been some exceptional activities and teaching going on that we're trying to replicate and share. So Patrick, I'm going to shut off my mic for a minute. And if you want to jump in on some of the things that are going on specifically in terms of learning in the district, that would be great.
I just want to clarify one thing. So we started today kind of the last 2-week cycle of what we're calling phase 2 of remote learning. The new guidance from the state is called phase 3, which just came out late Friday, and we're looking through that. So I would like to just read a couple of highlights from this. Not really for discussion right now. You can certainly ask follow-up questions, but I know parents might have more questions, and we'll get a post up on this probably by the end of the day tomorrow, just to highlight some of this. So with the extension, this is right from the document from DESE. I'm just going to read a couple lines here. With the extension of remote learning through the end of the school year, we want to expand on this recommendation to encourage districts and schools to promote students to the next grade level. And that's an action supported by research. And there's a link on the DESE page to research. So just, I know a lot of parents have asked about, will my child move to the next grade? Because we haven't had school in our classrooms as we traditionally do for what will be about 2 months or more. And so people are concerned about having their kids ready for the next grade level. But the commissioner is advising that we should continue to promote students to the next grade level. And the guidance also touches upon why. So here are what strong remote learning programming should be. There are 4 things that are pointed out. continuing to prioritize meaningful connections with educators and peers. That's number one. Number two is provide engaging core instruction focused on the content standards most critical for student success in the next grade. That's one of the big parts of this new guidance for phase 3 is the state has outlined what they're calling prerequisite standards for students to be ready for the next grade level. So that will be a big part of our focus for phase 3 of our remote learning plan, which will start on Monday, May 11th, I believe the date is. So number 3 is to offer opportunities for enrichment, exercise, and play. And number 4 is ensure programming is accessible and communication is streamlined for students and families. And there's an asterisk here, which I think is really important. We acknowledge that foundational student wellness and readiness is a critical prerequisite for students to engage in remote learning. So again, we're still prioritizing meaningful connections, making sure that we're connecting with educators and peers. And then once we're doing that, we're going to be starting to focus on these prerequisite standards, a lot of which we've covered. We have a list of all the standards from the state. A lot of them have been touched upon already. Our work during the next 2 weeks is to really highlight the ones that we want to make sure that we go a little bit deeper on before our students move on to the next grade. And I'll just leave it at that for now.
Thanks, Patrick. Through the chair, Ms. Monaco, we've also started early conversations about summer school, what summer school could possibly look like, any changes we would have to make. We would be looking for some guidance, obviously, from the Board of Health, both locally and at the state level, to determine when we can bring students back together. That's obviously summer school is connected to our Summer Central conversation as well, when we can bring kids together. And then obviously we have very early conversations about the fall and preparing for an opening of school that's going to be a little bit different for us. And we want to make sure that we're providing an opportunity for some of the closure from this year and moving on for next year. So it's not going to be a typical fall for us either. So we've started a lot of those conversations, and we're trying to plan for some different contingencies, and we're trying to have as broad a conversation as we can. And I think we talked today about really needing to develop a concrete plan for summer school by May 15th. So by the middle of May, because it's we have high demand for summer school, but we're still not sure we'll have access to the buildings, or what we'll need to do if we do have access to the buildings to make sure that if we have to practice some sort of modified distancing, what that would look like, especially for young kids. So I feel like in some of these conversations, we're having a lot of conversations. We don't have a lot of the answers yet because we're not exactly sure what the context is going to be, but we're trying to plan for different contingencies as we move forward. But it's, as of right now, we don't believe it's going to be a typical summer with summer school.
Well, that's unfortunate. We have to do what we have to do. We need to keep everyone safe. So please keep us updated on your work through the state with other communities, the Commissioner of Education, the governor, so that we have an understanding as we go forward what's happening.
Thank you. We've been trying to make sure that the committee gets copied on our daily emails, so you can see some of the learning that's taking place. So we'll make sure that we continue to do that. And we are working, the document from the state is pretty dense. We're working on a summary that we'll get to the school committee before the end of the week in terms of what they're looking for moving forward. It's really an adjustment. It's not a major change in direction, and we felt like we're very well positioned to make that adjustment. So I think we're in good shape in terms of following the state guidelines for the remainder of the year. It's just difficult, and I think all of our educators. And I think even Patrick and I were disappointed that we couldn't open schools back up again. So I think they're dealing with a bit of a sense of loss too, and wanting to see their kids and wanting to close out the year. So we're working through some adult issues. Some of our adults need support during this time as well.
Okay, any committee members wish to comment? Martha?
Yeah, I want to thank all the teachers and the staff and the administrators, Dr. Conti, for all that they're doing to provide this remote learning in this public health crisis, which is impacting our education. And I can't thank you all enough for everything that's being done. I also wanted to just comment in general that this remote learning is not ever going to really replace having our kids in the classrooms with the teachers, and education looks different for all of our students. And I appreciate what the families are dealing with. This is not what they signed up for either. Our teachers who have kids are doing both sides of it as well. And I also know that although none of the students are getting the same education that they typically get, our special needs students are in the same boat. They're not getting the education that they should be getting, that we would like to be giving them, and their families are often even in.
I think Martha's having a little trouble with her signal. Would any other committee member like to speak while we wait for her to return? Okay, Martha, you're back. Kristen, do you have any comments?
Sorry. Just echoing what Martha had said about the teachers and the parents and the families, and what Dr. Conti said about the sense of loss. It's just the heartbreaking in many different ways.
I just want to finish my sentence.
Yeah. Okay, hang on, Kristen. Go ahead, Martha. Martha, go ahead. Is your microphone on?
Mm-hmm.
I had one more sentence, which was just, we will continue. Yeah, can you hear me now or no?
Yes.
No. Eric can hear me.
Yeah,
Chris can't hear me, huh?
I can hear
well,
you.
We're just going to provide, we're going to provide as best we can to all of the students. And I will reinforce what Mrs. Russo was saying, that for our seniors, I know that we're working on what we can do, because it's been it's especially hard for them to lose out on events and things. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's go back to Kristen. You can finish up your comments.
That was just pretty much it. Everybody that's working so hard, and the students and the parents and the families, and just waiting for that time to look back on this and be able to move forward all together again. That social acceptance and togetherness that Mr. Larkin has mentioned in the past too. So important.
All right, thanks, Kristen. Tom or Steve, either of you wish to speak?
Yeah, I would just like to say, I hope there's something that we can come up with for the seniors we're never going to be able to make up for everything that they've lost, but I hope there's something creative that we can come up with to honor, their accomplishments and to give them the credit that they deserve. And I hope the administration has some creative ideas in that respect.
Mr. Nelson, through the chair, it's not just the administration. I think they're listening to kids. They're talking to teachers. They're taking input from parents. I think they're seeing what other high schools are doing across the country. So I think they're really trying to provide an opportunity for the seniors to celebrate in a safe way.
That would be nice.
That would be.
Tom, go ahead.
I just echo what's been said. I don't need to say it all again, but I appreciate everybody's efforts, and hopefully we'll get this thing squared away sooner rather than later.
Okay, I agree with everything everyone said. Eric and Patrick, keep on keeping on, and let's see if we can weather this storm and get back to school. Is there anyone else who wishes to comment on the update? Okay, moving on. Communication, Eric?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to follow down the agenda. We have a school building facilities update as part of the communication. So I'm going to, again, mute, and Bob, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Conti. Thank you to the chair. So I guess there's two parts of the school building facilities update. One that you'll see as section D in the communications, which is the architect services. In your packet tonight, there's a recommendation to select one of the architectural firms. The second part of this update is the MSBA statement of interest. Last night it was presented to the Board of Selectmen. They supported it 5-0 in a vote. You will also see that tonight in your packet for a vote from the school committee for the statement of interest. So we will need you to read that language. And if you have any questions, we'll discuss that, and then a vote will need to be taken. Just a reminder to everybody, the original date for the MSBA was April 6th. Obviously, due to the circumstances of the pandemic, it was pushed back until May 6th, which is our new current deadline, May 6th at 12 p.m. at night. So once we have the vote from the school committee, along with the vote from the Board of Selectmen, we will submit our statement of interest by next Wednesday at midnight. So that's my update for now. I'll take some questions, but like I said, you'll see a couple of things in the remainder of the packet in the meeting tonight.
Bob, the work that's going on at Francis Wyman, is that nearing completion?
Thank you for that. So yeah,
Chair,
it is near completion. We have two crews in Francis Wyman right now. They're working on previous warrant articles, the air conditioning on the first floor and the fire alarm throughout the whole entire building. Again, they do have limited crews, and I did tell you that they should be wrapping up in about 1 to 2 weeks at our last meeting. They are still in the buildings, both companies, but a little bit less, just wrapping up the project. So I do believe, hopefully by the end of this week, or maybe 1 or 2 days next week, and they will be done with both projects. That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair?
Yes.
Nicole reminded me, I forgot that we have a representative from Copeland and Page here with us this evening to discuss transportation. If you're in agreement, can we move the transportation services conversation next?
Yes, of course. I have a question though. When are we actually reading the wording and taking the vote on the project?
Bob, were we going to read the language tonight?
So the language is in the packet, yes. I guess if we were to do it, we would probably do it either under the statement of interest C. So that is communication C. So school building update, BEA unit is B, and then the school buildings SOI update.
All right.
So we can do it out of order now, or obviously at the chair's direction.
Well, we can get there when we get there. Go ahead on the transportation, Eric.
First of all, I want to recognize all of Nicole's efforts. She's been working with, I think, 6 or 7 other districts with our transportation company. Where obviously they're not providing services, so whether we pay the bill or not, I think the state had to get involved in terms of whether we can do that or not, and they were negotiating a percentage of the contract. We wanted to make sure that if school restarted, that the bus company and bus drivers would be ready to roll right away. And so we had representation, and I'll turn on mute and let Nicole sort of give you some of the background, because she was there. She was at the table and on all the calls. So Nicole, if you can do that, and then you can introduce our guest tonight as well. So I'm gonna mute my mic. So Nicole.
Yes, thanks, Dr. Conti. So as Dr. Conti mentioned, I have been sort of representing the district with, in conjunction with about 7 or 8 other school districts that have the same transportation provider. Basically, we want to ensure that there is a continuity of services when school does return. And in order to do so, we need to make sure that these transportation providers are available to do so. We started these conversations early in April. I think originally we started out in 95%. The information that you got in your packets this week shows that we got down to 78%. Originally, when we were negotiating with, in conjunction with the other districts, we had been using one of the other districts' council. Since then, I have obviously consulted with our council, and I can turn it over now to Matthew Fair. I think that's how you pronounce his name, and he can sort of, I guess, discuss what we've been talking about. So, Matt.
Welcome. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope you can all hear me and see me. Thank you, and I'm happy to be here tonight, and kudos to all of you for undertaking these difficult times in a very transparent manner. So that's great. I did want to, and I appreciate Nicole for reaching out to me. I've been in constant contact with Nicole and throughout this process of looking at the school transportation contract that was awarded to Trombley last year, I guess it was almost, and particularly the payment obligations of the district they're under in connection with the COVID-19 pandemic. And we represent, as you can imagine, several cities and towns and districts that are facing similar circumstances like yourselves, as far as to what extent do we honor those agreements in light of the fact that there's not full performance they're under. What terms would we consider in any such modification, or do we even do a modification? So, looking at this in its entirety, as I'm sure you're well aware, the contract documentation that the school district had issued last year made it clear that the committee has ultimate authority as far as restricting or eliminating the number of buses and vans needed for transportation-related services. There are some caveats to that, but in essence, the contract itself grants you the ability to determine in your discretion as to whether or not to reduce or eliminate services. In talking with Nicole, it sounds like, and I leave it to you to tell me otherwise, that the town wishes to maintain their contract to the extent they can, especially since you're early in your contract term, coupled with the fact that you want to ensure continuity of services for whenever this crisis is over. So taking that into account and then looking at the applicable law, I have been advising Nicole that the town may wish to basically enter into some temporary alternative arrangement with Trombley to basically bridge the gap, so to speak, so that you don't terminate the agreement, therefore have to go back out to bid, ensure continuity of services when this pandemic is over and the executive order is lifted and school can return to session, and avoid any other potential issues altogether. I also say this in light of recent federal legislation that was passed by the Congress and signed by the president late March, which would basically condition receipt of certain FEMA monies to elementary and secondary schools. That in order to receive such, that the municipalities and districts would have to honor their, to the extent practicable, their vendor contracts. This being one such type of arrangement. And so we obviously want to keep that in mind as we proceed. And then couple that with DESE interpretation and conversations that have ensued since at the State House and among administrators and other legislative and other leaders. It seems reasonable for me to advise you, in light of all this, that we enter into such a temporary arrangement. I know that there is a memorandum, I think, of understanding or agreement that's been circulated. As Nicole indicated, it seems like that's been discussed at length among various municipalities and districts that would are as part of this consortium with NRT Trombley. I will say this, that in light of everything I've looked at, including municipal finance law, because there's that issue, which is separate, it's related. And by the way, I will update you slightly on that in a second. But in light of everything, I think it's fair to say that certainly the payment of actual out-of-pocket expenses to ensure continuity of contract is appropriate. In this case, it sounds like this 78% reimbursement amount exceeds that, although it's difficult to ascertain to the extent that that is the case because we haven't seen any performance or any audited statement from the vendor to substantiate these costs. And so I would obviously encourage you to look at that to the extent we're able to obtain it. Maybe we do so pursuant to an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, or some other mechanism. But, I think it's fair to say that so long as we're able to cover the out-of-pocket expenses, in other words, the actual cost of keeping the buses on the lot, the fuel in the tank, and so on, which does come with a cost. I don't know the particulars here, but for example, financing of the buses, leases of the buses, any debt service on the buses, prior contract obligations that Trombley may have, by way of example, with fuel contracts, storage of fuel, registration costs, maintenance costs, repair costs, may even include some staff to do those things. I think that is what the intent behind the temporary arrangement model would look like. It becomes a business decision on the part of the committee here as to whether or not this also includes labor. I don't, in my opinion, these temporary arrangements would not necessarily include labor because we're not fully performing, but that becomes a business decision, not a legal one. And I leave that to you. Suffice it to say that, in my opinion, in order to comply with all applicable law, and notwithstanding any law to the contrary, I think it's, in my opinion, my advice to you would be to consider a temporary arrangement whereby you cover the costs, the actual costs associated with continuity of contract. Again, the things I outlined earlier, and that would be sufficient. I don't see the need to cover labor costs. Those are costs that any vendor makes a determination to undertake themselves. And in some cases, their competitors haven't done that. They have furloughed or laid folks off. And I'm not saying that's where we want to go. I'm just providing you the full picture for your purpose and for your edification as to what other vendors I've seen in other communities we represent have undertaken. In some cases, because of the sensitivity of the material that they provide you to support their number, I've seen non-disclosure agreements entered into by between the vendor and the community to ensure confidentiality to the extent allowable by law, so that there's a candid exchange of information. And I think particularly because the number in this case is 78%, which is higher than in other cases I've seen, because it's apparently inclusive of labor costs, we want to maybe be particularly careful about how do you substantiate that number, and maybe that's a way to do it. So there's no magic solution, but I think that taking all of this into account, that would be my advice to consider. I know that there's this memorandum draft before you, and a lot of that are business term oriented decisions you need to make as far as the reimbursement rate, as far as the term of the arrangement. I would say that we would probably want to, at the very least, add some language about ensuring that the underlying contract is so modified to the extent here, but only for the time thereof, that we maintain all the rights and remedies available to the town and its committee through you to ensure that all your rights are maintained under the underlying contract. I would suggest that if you were to proceed in this direction, you substantiate the numbers through some sort of NDA or some other mechanism. But I don't see, from high level, there's any issue from my perspective entering into this alternative arrangement. So that would be my, I guess, broad-based advice. The one footnote I mentioned earlier, which I'll mention to you now, is that I am aware that there's legislation afoot that could be addressed in any future relief package that the House, Senate, and the governor may sign ultimately that does address the accounting issues, which is specifically Chapter 41, Section 56 of the general laws. I have opined that it's not a necessary change. These types of arrangements can surely be entered into, notwithstanding the current language in that provision, which talks about warrants for payment of bills. Some of the accountants in towns and cities have raised some issue with that because the argument, again, is that we're not fully performing under the agreement. So how can we authorize the payment under that obligation, even if it's a temporary or mitigated payment amount? I would argue that any contract amendment becomes a contract for that purpose, and therefore it wouldn't arise to a need to address the legislation or the current statutory regime. And so I don't think we have to deal with that. But I mention it only because there is an effort afoot to make a change. And one of the changes, interestingly, is to provide cities, towns, and districts the ability to obtain certain financial information from these vendors for exactly the purpose I was indicating earlier, in that, we can agree to a 78 or a 52 or whatever the number is %, but, without substantiating that value, we don't know. We're taking them upon their word. This would provide a little cover. But like I said, in many cases already playing out are vendors who are more than happy to share that information and do so pursuant to, say, an NDA agreement or some other arrangement. So I know that's a lot of information, and I covered a lot of ground in probably less than 10 minutes, and I'm happy to answer questions, but that is kind of where we're at this point. Nicole, I don't know if you wanted me to address anything else in particular, or if I didn't cover something you wanted me to.
Nicole?
I think
Nicole, do you have anything?
no, I think we covered everything.
Okay. I know Kristen wants to speak, but we'll go to Eric.
Again, Madam Chair, I just wanted to just clarify a couple of things. So the arrangement that we negotiated for the 78% was prior to the governor's closing for the remaining part of the year. So part of that arrangement was the company could not lay off bus drivers. That was part of one of the guarantees of the 78% deal. And the reason we were concerned about having the bus drivers ready is we, again, at that point, we were slated to go back to school on May 4th. So we didn't want to have schools open and then not have the buses ready to roll on the day that we needed them with the drivers that we needed. So again, the context has changed slightly in terms of the need to have the drivers ready and available for May 4th. So the context has changed a little bit. So so I just wanted to set that the 78% was negotiated prior to the governor making his decision. I just wanted to stress that, and I will go back to mute.
Okay. Kristen, go ahead.
Thank you. I've been talking with Nicole over this because the 78% to me is just too much. And in looking at the breakdown of it, I don't see very little give at all on the vendor's part from this. I don't think it's the municipality's responsibility to fund the transportation company, which is what it seems like we're doing. where we're paying the full cost of vehicle, the full cost of rent, the full cost of their overhead, the vehicle financing, based on what I'm reading here. I don't feel comfortable that we have not seen any of their financial records that show us the funding of what these numbers are being made up from and what their costs are. And then at this point, I don't feel comfortable going through with this. And I do have a question. The statement was made that we need to maintain contract and continuity in order and honor contracts for FEMA money. Is there an amount associated with that, 50% or 60%? Because there was also a statement that 78% looks like it exceeds an amount that we need to fund.
Okay, Eric, do you want to get in? John Isla would like to speak as well. Eric, do you have any comment on, what are we doing? We're going to hold this and look at it further?
I think we can ask that question of council. If the context has changed, can we go back and try to negotiate a lower price? I guess is one of the things that we can ask. And then I think there's also what's the risk of non-payment? I think if I were a committee member, and me too, I'm curious as to what the risk is if we don't pay. So, but with that, and I want to make sure we answer Ms. Russo's questions as well, which was the range for FEMA dollars. Is that correct, Ms. Russo?
Yes. Yep.
And then if you want to see if get Mr. Eiler's question out there, then we can turn it back over to Matt.
Okay, John Isla.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, it's by the way, Nicole, I know a lot of work went into this, so nice job. I know it's hard coordinating that many people. Yeah, I have the same concern. I think I agree. Back when we were just trying to bridge a few-week gap, and we wanted to make sure that the buses are ready to roll, it made a lot of sense to be pretty flexible. Now that we know we're not going, for the rest of the year, I don't think it's our responsibility as a district to pay employees of vendors. How far does this go? I mean, we have 1 million vendors. We're not going to keep. We're not the unemployment office. I think the point is that it's our responsibility to consider town employees and decide what we want to do with them. I don't think it's our job to be funding employees of vendors. The unemployment system is there for that purpose. And not to be cold-hearted about it, but I will be. It's not like these people are all going to get jobs at other transportation companies and disappear because they're not running either. So, the people will, the companies will manage to get their employee base back when they need to. So I would chop that full 60% off before I went any further. I'm a little suspicious of, while I'm sure that, the vendor's honest, I think, there's a tendency to be very aggressive in applying costs. I'm suspicious of any business operating on a 3% profit margin. I don't know why they would ever take a contract if that was their actual margin. I understand they mentioned that they make money from charters and so forth, but 10% is a typical business profit margin. So that sounds a little shaky there. And then in the NIT category, I'll just mention on number 5. On number 6, savings from insurance credits explicitly are passed through to the district. On number 5, savings relating to the federal and state credits, while sort of implied, it doesn't explicitly state that they would pass through. So I would just suggest a wording improvement on number 5 if we did want to go forward with it. But the big ticket item is really the employees, which I would say we need to cut out of the funding now that we know we're out of business for a year.
All right, thanks, Mr. Ryler from Ways and Means. We will certainly consider your comments. Martha, I know you want to speak. Go ahead.
I somewhat want to just, I was going to say similar comments to what Mr. Eiler was saying, and that is that this 78% contract, in addition to the concerns that Mrs. Russo has brought up and the comments that our legal counsel has offered, it was negotiated under different conditions that we thought we'd be going back on May 4th or possibly soon after that. And given that we're not going back for the rest of the year, I would like us to look at this possibility. I'm not comfortable voting this particular contract tonight. I would like us to renegotiate. And I know that Nicole, you spent a lot of time on this and probably other people. And at the time, I think this was a good, proposal, but I would like us to look at it. And in particular, I am concerned about our bus drivers. I know how valuable they are and how important they are to our students, but I do know that sometimes they even go on unemployment in the summer. And so if this is an extended break, there is unemployment available. There's more unemployment resources available than typical. And I would like to not see the school district and the municipality paying for that right now through this contract with our transportation vendor, and that one item maybe could make a difference as well in what we do. I like the other things that got mentioned around seeing more evidence with an NDA and finding out more about it. And if our legal counsel has to get involved in the negotiations more, so be it. But I would like us to look at a new proposal, given that we're now closed at least till the end of the school this year. And once again,
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, once again, this crisis is not something any of us could have predicted, and we're all trying to figure out how to not hurt other people in the situation, but we also don't want to be paying for things that we aren't receiving, just like the parents, are concerned about after school program and such. But in this case, I feel like this is an area where people could go on unemployment. Thank you.
All right, Steve, do you have anything before we go back to the attorney?
One of the questions that I had, and I would like to hear town council's response to the FEMA question that Kristen posed. But one of the concerns I had was that what if we're running classes over the summertime? Shouldn't we get some type of a commitment from the transportation company if we're going to fund them for not providing services during the school year, that they ought to perhaps make a commitment to provide any transportation that we might need if we end up having summer courses? So that's something I'd like us to look into as well.
All right, Tom?
I agree with most of what's been said. I had the same, Mr. Isla was nitpicking, and I had the same comment on paragraph 5. Didn't have the same language as it did in paragraph 6. So if we have to circle around and put a new agreement together, I would look for that language to be brought through. But I think everybody said it, and I agree that circumstances have changed, and certainly we should take that into consideration before we enter into any agreement at this point. I'd be curious, maybe Nicole's received some feedback. If there are a handful of other towns that were part of this negotiation, I'd be curious if any or all of them are also reconsidering the situation or not. So I think it's something we have to look in, add a little bit more, and paying for the some of the overhead, like council said, is not necessarily a bad thing to make sure there's a company there when it's all said and done. But if we back out all paying the drivers for the balance of the year, that's going to be a substantial chunk of money. As Martha said, they have compensation available to them. That will lower 78% down to a much lower number.
Okay, let's go back to our attorney.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to members. So the question, I guess, was a little bit of what was at stake as part of the CARE Act, if I recall correctly. So my understanding is that there was an earmark of $13.5 billion, or 44% of the total education stability fund portion of the stimulus under CARE Act that would be directed to elementary and secondary education schools throughout the United States. The provision I referred to earlier is the so-called condition. It appears in Section 18,006 of the CARE Act, which basically, as I indicated earlier, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, makes it clear that, as a condition of receiving those funds and whatever your allocation is thereunder, that districts continue to pay their employees and contractors for services to the extent practicable. And like I said, there's been this discussion about what does practicable mean, including in light of state law. I don't think, again, there's any issue there, in my opinion, particularly on the finance law side. That's been brought up of late, although, again, there is legislative efforts afoot to address that issue potentially, which you may want to see how that plays out as well as part of this discussion, because like I said, at least my understanding is there's some potential language in that may be inserted in a measure that could address the substantiation of the receipt of grants that, paragraph 5 of the MOA, for example, addresses, and some other items. May even go further. It's very fluid right now as far as how far does that legislative language go as far as providing municipalities the ability to look at information to substantiate the numbers. But again, my opinion is that your receipt of that assistance under CARE Act, and I don't know the exact number that this town would receive, but these are stimulus funds that are available. We want to be careful, of course, and cautious about foregoing that by not doing the right thing. And that's why I wanted to stress that issue tonight, because, again, I think any temporary arrangement is a practicable solution. It's consistent with DESE's FAQ they issued back on March 27th, which was when the U.S. Senate had passed this bill to be engrossed before it went to the House and to the president for signature, although the condition language, if you will, in Section 18,006 remained unchanged, so there's no reason to believe that DESE would find differently. I think in light of all of that, some sort of a temporary bridge agreement like this is appropriate. I don't disagree with any comments made. There was nothing in particular I felt the need to address, but I hope that helps answer your question.
Madam Chair, may I jump in?
Yes, go ahead, Aaron.
My understanding is the CARE Act money is going to be distributed in Massachusetts following the Title I formula. So Burlington is not eligible for a whole lot. So 68 plus $1 million budget. I think we get about $100,000 in Title I. So very little. So I'm not sure we're risking much by not by again jeopardizing not paying this particular vendor. Again, Matt, I hate to be so blunt, but I just want to hear from you and Nicole. If we don't reach agreement, what happens? Do we lose we break the contract, we lose the contract, we have to go back out to bid? Is that worst case scenario? Are there any other consequences? Is there any financial harm to the district? And if we go back and say the context has changed, we want to renegotiate, or we think we shouldn't pay 78%, how long should that take? Should that take a month? Should that close out by the end of the fiscal year? Mr. Nelson mentioned summer programming. Should we have that settled before June? Just give me some scenario. So clearly we don't have the votes to pass the 78% agreement. What are the consequences?
Certainly, Madam Chair, through you to members. So in response to Dr. Conti's question, I think the answer, plain and simple, is that if you don't perform by paying them, they could raise that as a termination event. I would argue also that we do enjoy, as I indicated in my earlier comments, that the town certainly enjoys some level of flexibility under the specifications that were issued as part of the IFB that Trombley bid on, that provides the district authority to reduce or eliminate routes. So they undertook that when they submitted their bid and accepted that contract term. So we do have some leverage as far as the contract's concerned. But ultimately, worst case scenario, to get to Dr. Conti's point, is yeah, there could be a termination arising and we'd have to go back out to bid. My recollection last year where there were 2 vendors, one of whom I think served the district for some time, if I recall correctly. And, ultimately that's a choice that needs to be made here. I'd have to go back and look more closely at the underlying agreement as far as remedies are concerned. But, again, my recollection, having looked at this for a while back and talking with Nicole, is the specifications with some caveats do provide the town the ability to eliminate these routes altogether. I think there was particular language in the contract documents, and I want to revisit it, but there was a 30-day notice requirement, a reduced payment structure provided during that 30-day period of notice, and then that reduction would take effect. So that's what the specifications indicate and provide the town. Every one of these is different, but in most cases, the contracts do provide pretty, more cases than not sole discretion on the part of the awarding authority, the city, town, or district, the ability to reduce or eliminate routes. So that is an argument we could make, but we do run into a contract dispute potentially with the vendor. And so again, going back to what I said before, it becomes kind of a business decision. Do we want to simply terminate, maybe find ourselves in court, and go back out to bid, or do we want to ensure continuity of services? Going to Dr. Conti's point about summer programs and the like, I think that's a reason, obviously substantiating some temporary agreement. And again, if that's structured appropriately, we agree to do that. That bridges the gap for the purposes of all the issues we discussed earlier. And I don't think that runs afoul of any state or federal law. So
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Eric.
Does anyone want to argue for the 78%? Nicole?
Nicole, where are you?
I'm here. No, I can see both sides of it, but ultimately, I think that this decision is up to the committee, and I'll proceed however the committee wishes.
I have a question. Eric, is Nicole handling this negotiation completely? Is there anyone working with her?
Council.
Okay. So I think where you're going, Eric, is instead of spending a lot more time on it, we're not going to pass this tonight. So how about if Nicole and our council go back to the drawing board?
Right. And again, the consequences are that if the vendor doesn't want to offer anything lower than 78%, then I think that some of the consequences are, I believe what council is saying is the committee then can reduce the number of routes and still be in compliance with the contract. So you could go to one bus and one route and still keep the contract up, and we could sort of lower our cost. But again, for me, it's all about turnaround. It's when we do open schools back up, we need to have the buses and the drivers ready to go. So I think that's the dilemma that we're in. But I certainly think Nicole and council can go back and say, now that we know we're going to be closed all year, now that we don't have the same need to have the drivers ready and available, what can you do for us? And then we can report back at the next school committee meeting.
I agree completely. I think we should have Nicole and our council go back to work on this and put it off for the next meeting. And hopefully the bus company will work with us to come up with a reasonable agreement. Does anyone else wish to speak? Kristen?
Thank you. I just was wondering if we are paying the bus company currently and what percentage we are paying them. And then I just want to thank Nicole for all her hard work on this and now sending her back to the drawing board, but really appreciate everything that she has done leading up to this too.
Okay, Nicole, do you know what we're paying them currently?
So we haven't paid for any services past the close of school so far.
Okay. All right, so Nicole, are you good with going back and reworking this?
Yes.
Okay, we thank you very much for your efforts and your input. We thank our attorney for his efforts and input, and we hope that the two of you will work together to come up with a better plan.
Quick comment.
Yes, John.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just regarding the changing of routes, as I recall from the contract, I don't think we cut it all the way back to one route. I think it was a certain percentage of routes that could be cut within the contract. So just want to be careful on that assumption and go back and reread that before we chop it back to one route.
All right, thank you.
That's why we have the attorney there, Mr. Eiler.
Excellent.
All right, are we moving on now to the next item on our agenda, which is BEA Unit A Memorandum of Understanding, 1-year contract agreement. Dr. Conti? Erica, are you muted?
I want to thank the Burlington Educators Association. That's the teachers. That's Unit A. That's our largest union, our largest payroll. We were in the middle of bargaining a new contract. Their 3-year contract is ending when the closure happened. That necessarily hampered our ability to negotiate and to bargain. I think they were very flexible in talking to us about getting a 1-year agreement in place, just to put off the bargaining until next year, when hopefully we can do it in person and face to face. And I think we had Ms. Monica, you were there. We had only had one meeting. Is that correct?
Correct.
Our first meeting. And I think in speaking to the union, and I think you read in their document, it's a 2.5% COLA with no changes in working conditions. It's a relatively simple agreement. It gives us some budgetary certainty, which I think was very important to us moving into, because town meeting is moving so late. It allows us to be much more confident about our guideline proposal that's later on in the agenda. I think what was very important to the to Unit A is they had some working conditions that they were very interested in discussing. And I know the school committee had some working conditions that they were also interested in discussing. And they didn't want this 1-year agreement to be sort of give any indication that they don't want to go back to the table next year to discuss working conditions again. So I think an important part of the agreement is that, again, nothing's off the table moving forward, but this basically gets us through fiscal 21, provides some certainty. And I certainly appreciate the teachers' willingness to do this. I think it goes a long way towards settling our budget conversation, which is coming up in the agenda. We have yet to settle Unit D, which are team chairs and department heads mostly. I'll work on that as soon as the committee ratifies this. And again, that's a much smaller unit. We've accounted for the sort of a similar cost of living. And then we just have to settle clerical to move forward. But again, much smaller units. And the Unit A, the teachers were the biggest unknown in the fiscal 21 budget moving forward. So again, I'm going to strongly encourage the school committee to ratify the 1-year agreement. Within the 1-year agreement, there's also a memorandum of agreement about remote learning strategies. We're in the middle of that. So I just think by adopting the MOU for the year, you're also adopting some remote learning expectations, which again are also acceptable to the administration. And the union is organizing electronically, and they're going to have an open voting, electronic voting on Friday. So we're a little bit out of order in terms of typically we take a ratified contract to the school committee. Just because of the situation and because of some of the technology, I'm going to ask that the school committee ratify the 1-year agreement this evening.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to that effect?
I so move. Martha Simon.
Okay, Martha Simon moves that the memorandum of agreement be approved as presented to us. Is there a second?
Second, Kristen.
Okay, the moved and seconded to approve the BEA Unit A Memorandum of Understanding 1-year contract agreement. We will take a roll call vote. All those in favor? Mrs. Simon?
I just want to say that I'm really pleased that the union was flexible and agreed to this 1-year agreement. And the price, that it was really important that we have something in place. And I'm really glad that we'll be able to have this raise in place for our teachers. And I vote aye.
Mrs. Russo?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Abstain.
Mr. Nelson?
I would also abstain, Madam Chair, and for the record, I would indicate that I did not participate in any of the negotiations involving this issue.
Mrs. Monaco votes aye. The memorandum passes with a vote of 302. And thank you to everyone who worked so hard to make it happen. Moving on.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
my belief is Sharon's going to find some safe way to get you to sign it, or we're going to do some sort of electronic.
Yeah, we'll work it out.
So we'll work it out. Thank
Yep,
you.
we're good. Elementary school building statement of interest approval. We need someone, Mr. Nelson, who'd like to read that. Do you have it printed out? Your mic is off. Steve, your mic is off.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to read this. Madam Chair, I move that the school committee vote tonight to approve the following resolution. Resolved, having convened in an open meeting on 4/28/2020, prior to the statement of interest submission closing, the school committee of Burlington, in accordance with its charter, bylaws, and ordinance, has voted to authorize the superintendent to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the statement of interest form dated 5/6/2020 for the Fox Hill School located at 1 Fox Hill Road, which describes and explains the following deficiencies in the priority categories for which an application may be submitted to the School Building Authority in the future. Priority number 2, elimination of severe overcrowding. Priority number 7, replacement of or addition to obsolete buildings in order to provide for a full range of, my paper is cut off here. Do you have that full range of programs, I believe it is. Full range of programs consistent with state and approved local requirements, and hereby further specifically acknowledges
that by
submitting the statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way
guarantees
the acceptance or the approval of an application, the awarding of a grant or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the city, town, regional school district
to
filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority. Thank you. My printer cut off some of the language.
All right, that last part was school district to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Correct.
All right, so is there a
second?
Tom seconded it. Okay, thanks. Does anyone wish to speak to that, Kristen?
No, just fingers crossed, and thank you, Bob.
Martha?
Yes, just thank you to Bob and everyone who helped put that together.
Tom?
Are we voting too? Or
We will in a minute.
Okay.
Tom?
I support the request.
Steve?
I heard Bob say that the selectmen supported it. I did want to thank the selectmen also.
Okay, I'd just like to comment that I thank the selectmen as well, and I'm very excited to see us finally moving forward with this. It's exciting. I see a new elementary school in the distant horizon. Right, is there, we'll take the vote now. All those in favor, Ms. Simon,
Aye.
Ms. Russo,
Aye.
Mr. Murphy,
Aye.
Mr. Nelson,
Aye.
Ms. Monaco votes aye. That's 5-0-0. Okay. Moving on. Architectural services contract, Bobby.
Thank you to the chair. So I'm trying to think back in February, end of January, early February, we submitted an RFQ, which is a request for qualifications, looking for architect and engineering on-call services. Doing a lot of research, this is pretty typical that a lot of schools and municipalities do something like this. What we've done in the past few years is just reach out, do designer selection when a project came about. But doing this allows us the flexibility to A, work with somebody who gets familiar with our buildings, but B, go back to them if they've already worked on a project. So by doing the selection, we got over 24 people who requested information. We had 6 companies submit actual qualifications. We narrowed it down to 3 companies. And then we did interviews and further research on each one of these companies. Presented before you tonight, I am recommending CBI Consulting. They are out of Dorchester. I think that their portfolio and the proposal that was submitted to us speaks for itself. They had a large history in regards to school and municipal projects. And in-house, they have a large team that covers the vast selection of mechanical and engineering and architectural services and things that, like I said, a school would need. All of their references checked out, and believe it or not, about 7 years ago, we actually used them on one of our projects. So they do have some slight familiarity with us. And like I said, that given the packet information that was submitted, I would strongly recommend them. What is to be noted to the committee is that the contract has not been presented yet, and there is no dollar attached to it. They have submitted fees to us that I will share with the community, and of course, those will be part of the contract that we're looking to do. But again, it's not a fee. So we would bring them on for 3 years or less if we choose to, and we would only pay them if we requested services from them. So again, it cost the district nothing to make this selection, but we are able to use them and seek advice from them, and they gave us a fee for hours. But typically what happens is based on the size of the project, quotes are usually given and discounted fees are assessed for the total project. So again, what you would be voting on tonight is supporting my recommendation to bring CBI Consulting on as on-call architect and engineering service firm for 3 years. Thank you.
And Bobby, that the only payment will be work as it's done.
Correct. There is no fee to sign a contract with them. All the signing the contract does is make us whole with the RFQ and the designer selection. When we ask them for work, they will present us with a fee at the time or the hourly rate that they've already shared with me, depending on the scope and scale of the project.
Okay, Eric, your mic's off.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bob, thank you for doing all the work. So I appreciate that. So I wanted to start with gratitude. So thank you. It'll be nice to have a firm on. When I first started, we had KVA on, I think a similar arrangement, and they did a lot of work for us, answered a lot of questions. So I think it'll be good to have another firm on. we do have an open warrant for a, correct, make sure I say this correctly, but to create bid documents for the high school's heating and cooling system. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
And so we have that money available. Is that project something this firm could put together those bid documents?
It's definitely something within the scope of what this firm does. So they do mechanical and engineering and plumbing, and boiler construction is definitely, they have a vast history and experience with. So yes, they could do this.
Okay, and again, just a rough estimate of the size of that type of project?
Given previous estimates, we could be looking somewhere in the $12 to $15 million range. But again, we don't know exactly, which is why we would take advantage of a firm like this to do a deeper dive and give us a real final estimate.
Would they also be able to tell us, well, you need to do this next month, these things are going to die, or we can do this over the next year comfortably? Or do you have, I know no one can predict when emergencies happen, certainly given the situation we're in now, but is this potentially, say, $15 million project something we need to start talking about the town more immediately, or is this something that we need to think about in the next year or two?
I think given our previous building assessments that were done in the master plan, we know that the boilers are on borrowed time. And by that, I mean, these boilers are 30 years old. They have been retubed 3 times that I'm aware of. We are maintaining them. So we do not expect them to collapse tonight. But again, we can't predict the future. I think that any firm that looks at our boiler system currently would recommend an immediate plan to replace them. I think designing that will take a few months. Obviously, funding will take a few months, so we're going to have fingers crossed that we're approaching the warm season. So I think bringing them on now is actually beneficial to us with the boilers shut down. I think that September, I would love to be able to have more defined documents to present to the school committee and possibly the town. But again, I think that's wishful thinking if we are on a fast track timeline. But again, fingers crossed that we're not going to lose anything having school out right now. I think we have some positive, having the warm time coming up. I think we're good. But I think that once this firm comes in, looks at our systems, I think they will be able to give us a clearer time frame for what they believe is the life expectancy of our current equipment.
So again, I'm sorry to be so blunt, but when bids go out, they typically have a lifespan as well. So if someone bids on the project, that price they give us isn't good for forever. It might be good for 90 days. Are you thinking about it a year from this May? Let's say town meeting goes back on a regular cycle. Are we going to be asking for boiler money a year from now?
Again, that would be the intent. So I think what will happen is that when it's designed and it has the documents in place, they will provide a rough estimate as to the bid specs. Then what will happen is as we secure funding, we'll go out to bid. I think that as long as the design hasn't changed, if we cannot secure funding and we have to update the bid, I think the potential would really just be the estimate of the cost. May need to be changed, but again, the intent would be we get the design specs, we go out to bid, and we secure funding.
And I'm going to ask you a question I already know the answer to, and Madam Chair, then I'll mute. Is I bet you're going to get a question from a school committee member about can they design science labs while they're designing a new heating and cooling system, and I believe the warrant language again, and I've confirmed this with Nicole and yourself, limits their work, the existing warrant language limits their design work to solely the boiler system. So we would need one of the warrants that we have in place for this year for some funding for them to do some extra design work if they needed to tear up all the ceilings anyway to put the new heating and cooling system in, they could do some extra. This firm has the capacity to do extra design work, potentially like upgrading science labs or something else like that. I know we don't have the funding for it right now, but if we do have the funding for it, that's something that they could do as well.
I believe it would be right in their wheelhouse. Anything from building a new school to just upgrading a small single boiler system is something that this company has plenty of experience with. As you mentioned, our boiler system, being in a 360,000 square foot building such as the high school, is not just confined to one room. Our ceilings, our hallways, our everything are open game. Once we start looking at our systems for upgrades, we have 13 penthouse units up on our roofs. So we do have the potential to look at more than just boilers, structural engineers, roofing, wiring, ceiling experts, things like that, and all within the realm of what this company has in-house and experience with.
Again,
we don't have the funding yet to reach for, but that is something that we will be looking for to ask a town meeting for.
So, Madam Chair, I didn't want to preempt the school committee question, but I think if that warrant article is going to be important, if we want this company to look beyond the boilers, and they might even require additional money to do some building design if that's the committee's choice moving forward. So, because the high school project is sort of is not an MSBA project, we're sort of working, we can work at our own pace, but we are going to have to, the warrant money that we currently have for the boiler isn't flexible enough for us to use the design firm to do anything but the boiler. So we would need additional money through the warrant that you're voting on in a little while to have them do some preliminary work looking at other aspects of design. So with that, I will mute. Bob, thanks.
Okay. If I could have a motion and a second, I'll then take comments from the committee.
All right, Madam Chair, Steve Nelson speaking. I move that the school committee award a 3-year contract to CBI Consulting LLC for on-call architectural and engineering services as proposed in RFQ number 01-26-2020.
I second that.
Okay, Sharon, you can decide who seconded it, but it's been moved and seconded. Now, who would like to speak to that? I can see all of you, so if you just put your hand up if you want to say something. Martha?
Yes, I want to thank you, Bob, again, for, I know it was a lot of work to go through all those bids and RFQs and things. But my first question is, at the beginning, you had said we might even decide to sign an agreement with more than one. And so can you explain what changed? I think the answer is that this firm can do the architectural, the design, the engineering parts. So we need to have one to do engineering and one to do architectural. But if you could just explain briefly if that's correct. How that.
So through the chair, my second choice recommendation would have been for a firm that focuses strongly on mechanical engineering and so forth, and then a secondary focus on architect services. The firm I'm recommending focuses on architect services first, and then secondary engineering. So they actually work with the company that my second recommendation. During my negotiations and our interviews, they had said that they will waive any fees that they would put on top and pass through the exact quotes that were provided by the other engineering firm. They have a history of more than 18 years working together with this company. So that was a concern of mine as well, picking two separate companies, making sure that they would be able to work together. Plus it gets into billing and hand off whose job is whose job. The fact that both of these companies were actually willing together and fall within the one billing structure made the decision relatively simple for me.
Thank you. And Mrs. Monaco, if I could ask another question.
Go ahead.
So And I want to thank you, Eric, for explaining, because that was my question of can we get more design than just the boiler? Because as I've said before, I just can't imagine that opening up the whole building to redo the HVAC systems wouldn't involve all those other parts. So I definitely support making sure that we get that warrant article for the summer, and that we, and so Bob, is that firm also one that you would choose for all the other parts of the design work for the EHS renovation and such? And would we have, if town meeting approves that warrant article, would we have the money to have them working on that soon enough?
So again, through the chair, yes, I think this is the perfect relationship that we would be looking for, meaning that we would have one point of contact to focus on, but with multiple facets that they would be able to help us as a community with. So by signing them to a 3-year contract or less at the school committee's discretion, not only could we use it for boiler repair, we could use it for, something as simple as, cutting a doorway into the hallway in one of our classrooms. We could use it as something larger than putting an addition on a building. We could use it for paving our parking lots. The town could use this as well too for their contract. So this isn't a small architect firm that just started recently. This is a larger architect firm that has a lot of experience, like I said, with municipal and school buildings. So again, I think their proposal and their expertise really fits well with what we would be looking for.
Okay, thank you. Can we move on now? Martha, are you through?
Yes, thank you. Sorry.
Okay, Mr. Nelson.
Yeah, just a couple of quick, Eric, you did ask most of my questions. And I just wanted to say to Bob, I think it's great to have an experienced architectural firm on board. We had KBI architects for many, many years, and they were very, very helpful to us in planning and implementing our construction projects over the years. We do have $100,000, as Eric pointed out, left over in a 2020 HVAC design warrant article. We've got another $100,000 proposed this year for design work. So that gives us $200,000 to get started on the design. And these design projects are expensive. They're not cheap. Usually the architects, I think, Bob, you can correct me if I'm wrong, they're looking at 10% or 12% of the total cost of a project. So this is just a drop in the bucket. But as we go forward, Bob will be able to get estimates from this design firm as to what they would need in order to design, for example, a new Fox Hill School, if we want them to do that, or if we want them to look at the issues over at Pine Glen. They can give us an estimate of what it would cost to do that work, and then we can go to town meeting with a warrant article and ask town meeting to fund that future design work. So I just want to make it clear that these two small warrant articles aren't going to be enough to handle the design work that we need going forward, but I think it's a great start. So I'm in full support of this warrant article and of this design firm coming on board on a 3-year contract.
Okay, Mr. Murphy?
No, I'm in support. I'm confident in Bob's judgment and due diligence. I'm sure this is a good firm. I'm comfortable working with them.
Kristen?
Same here. I'm very comfortable with everything I've heard and appreciate all the work that Bob's done. I look forward to this time with them.
Okay, I agree. I am as well, Bob. It sounds like you did a great job on this. And now we will go to a vote. All those in favor of approval of the architectural services contract? Mrs. Simon?
I am enthusiastically voting aye.
Ms. Russo?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Nelson?
Aye.
Mrs. Monaco votes aye. That's 5-0-0. Moving on. Next is our school budget public hearing. Eric, is that where we're going now?
Yes, ma'am. So just for some background before we open the public hearing, I want to make sure I thank Nicole. She works countless hours to prepare the budget and budget documents. And I just think the budget is very well organized, and the system she has really allows us to make adjustments on the fly, try some different scenarios, and I just think that the new format has really come together over the years to be very effective. I also want to thank the Ways and Means Subcommittee. We get to know each other very well over the course of these few months. And now with the remote meetings, everyone was very flexible, and just I can't thank them enough for their time and their input. We did have a subcommittee meeting last Thursday, and Mr. Nelson, Mr. Murphy participated. And again, they certainly can confirm what I'm saying. Ms. Harrigan can confirm, but we wanted to make sure we answered all their outstanding questions, which I believe we did. And we explained to them how we were bringing the budget down to the 3.7%, 3.75% guideline that we have agreed to working with town. So we can get into those details shortly. I believe tonight you're also going to be looking at the accommodated account as a part of that, and then we wanted to reserve some time for the to revisit the capital warrants as a part of the conversation as well. So those are the basically the three buckets. But again, I just wanted to start by recognizing Nicole's efforts. So yay, Nicole, and I want to thank the Ways and Means subcommittee. So Nicole, I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that or what they're looking at in the documentation that you provided.
Sure. So I think you summed it up pretty well. One thing that I do want to note is that since the last time that the committee was presented with the accommodated budget, there has been an adjustment to what we were predicting for circuit breaker. Given the current situation, we're not, I guess, as confident that circuit breaker will be fully funded next year, especially because there's no House budget out yet. We have nothing to rely on in terms of what reimbursements will look like. So we did adjust from a 70% circuit breaker reimbursement to a 65% reimbursement, which brings accommodated to a 5% increase now.
Okay, Mr. Nelson.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we open the public hearing on the FY21 school budget.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to open the public hearing. Ms. Simon?
Aye.
Ms. Russo?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Nelson?
Aye.
Ms. Monaco votes aye. The public hearing is now open. Does someone want to go over the numbers so that people know what they're questioning? Nicole, how about you?
Sure. You just want me to go over how we got to guideline, or
Well, why don't you mention the well, actually I'll start and then you can go over how we got there, okay?
okay.
So we have the FY21 school budget, which has a salary account of $47,967,549, and expenses. What does that mean, Nicole? Expenses?
All non-salary.
Okay, which is $7,506,389 for a total operating budget of $55,473,938, which is a 3.75% increase, and a special ed accommodated budget of $12,615,139, which is a 5% increase. Now, Nicole, if you would just make a few comments on how we got there, because we were a lot higher than that.
Sure. So originally when we started out, I think we were over 4%. In order for non-operating to come down to guideline, we removed all new positions with the exception of 2 nurses. And then for the expenses, non-salary expenses, we level funded all of those budgets. Any increases over 0% that were requested, we brought back down to 0 to level fund over FY20. And that's how we got to the 3 point.
Okay, Dr. Conti, would you just make some comments on, I'm sure this isn't where you wanted the budget to go, but given the situation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I want to thank all of the cost center, their principals, department heads, everyone who puts their budgets together. I think the format and the process that we've created allows the committee and the Ways and Means Subcommittee to hear everyone's full requests. I don't think anyone asked for anything that was outrageous or that was excessive. I think they're asking for the resources they need, that they feel they need to do the best job possible. And that included a bunch of new positions that we would love to fund. Many of those new positions have been in prior budget requests. The committee and the Ways and Means Subcommittee, I think, are very familiar with some of those requests, hearing them year after year. We did have a commitment to bring the budget in at guideline. What was interesting is someone asked me the question, I think it was last meeting, given the current context, would I change any of the recommendations? I think they were asking that question in the context of the warrant articles. But if I apply that same question to the operating budget, what's interesting to me is, let's say I said we don't need the nurses right away. We can get the nurses next year. We should go with a math specialist and a computer science teacher. Given the health crisis we're currently in, maybe that would have changed my mind. But I think we are we're recommending nurses from the very beginning. So it seemed to align with the situation we're in. We did add a nurse a few months ago as well because of just the sheer numbers of need that we had prior to the pandemic. So we will be starting fiscal 21 with 3 additional nurses, which is what lead nurse Conley said that we needed at the fall. So we are meeting her demands as outlined by the data that she presented to the school committee at the start of the budget process. And again, we are leaving some of the other requests off. Those needs don't go away. We'll continue to make things work. We still have some unknowns going into the fall, and just because of the situation that we're in. But we feel with this guideline budget, with the teacher's contract agreed to, which was a huge unknown for us, that we feel much better going into fiscal 21 at the 3.75 operating budget that's been presented to you.
Okay, I'm going to open this, if the committee is in agreement, I'll open this up to the public for comments at this point. Is there any member of the public here who wishes to ask a question about the budget or make a comment about the budget? I see everyone is racing to question the budget. Do any other committee members or Ways and Means members have anything to say before we close the budget hearing? Martha? Mic's off.
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to just comment. I think this is the right budget this year. I'm disappointed that we weren't able to, in particular, to add a couple other positions that I think we really need. And I don't think anyone is in disagreement with that, but I agree that having the nurses is a top priority. We need to make sure our students are safe. but there were two areas that I was hoping we'd be able to add, and one was the math specialist at Fox Hill, because I feel that there's equity issues across the district, with Fox Hill being our second largest school now, and not having a math specialist. And so I have discussed this with Dr. Conti, and I hope in next year's budget, if it ends up we have some additional retirements and have some money, that could be a potential place that I would like to see us add some services for kids. I also, talked with Dr. Conti about, could we share teachers between math specialists, but I understand that when you share teachers between buildings, you lose time, instructional time, you lose organizational time for, each building has its own structure, so that's not necessarily the best option. But I just wanted to stick that I am very concerned. It's been a few years now that we've been trying to get a math specialist for the Fox Hill. And of course, that doesn't get us a math specialist for Pine Glen either. But I wanted to comment on that. I also was a little concerned about, we had a couple of requests for special education staff, but I wanted to be sure that we have a couple of new programming situations at the high school and at the middle school. And I was not sure, but I think that Dr. Conti feels relatively comfortable that those new positions will not be to the detriment of the success of our special ed programming that we've started. And but I did want to say that that was on my radar because I had actually hoped to spend some of the time this spring finding out more about these new programs, that now that they've been through most of a year and they've been reconfigured, and I'm very encouraged. I think Ms. Mary Hood has done a great job, and the staff who've been staffing them. I'm really pleased that we have those new special ed programs, and I just want to ensure their ongoing success. And then, having, after we didn't add any other new positions in addition to the nurses, Nicole and Eric and other people were able to find a way to shave the rest of it off. So we are meeting the 3.75% guideline for this budget. And I also want to thank the town side. I know I've been reading their messages, and they are looking ahead and feeling that we can go forward to fiscal year 21 with the guidelines that were agreed to last fall. And I look forward to town meeting and hope to be able to answer any questions there. But I want to thank everybody for the work that went into this. Thank you.
Diane Creedon has a comment. Diane, are you there? Is your mic on?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yep.
I just really wanted to reiterate what Martha had said. For the past few years, we've gone through with the cutbacks and the positions, and it was really disappointing to hear all of the reasoning, that the departments found it necessary to add new positions and then to have to eliminate all of them. We keep wanting to go forward and making sure that the students have every service needs met. And I'm thrilled that we were able to come in at the budget, but I am disappointed that the only addition this year was the nurses, which I understand the reason for it, but there was so much justification of the other positions as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Diane. I couldn't agree with you more. Tom, you had something?
Just real quick, and I just want to acknowledge that the administration, Eric and Nicole and Bob, have been working closely with the town over the past few weeks. And I think it's an indication of the good job that's been done over the years from my financial planning and budgeting standpoint, that we're not sitting here knocking our 3.75% down to 2% or something out of concern over what's happened over these past couple of months and what might happen moving forward. So clearly the the town administrator and the selectmen have done a nice job over there, and also are not panicking under the circumstances. They know we're in a position to be able to deal with this, at least in the short term, and enable us to move forward with the budget under the guidelines that we set back in November or December, whenever it was. So like everybody, I'm also disappointed that we couldn't get some of the important positions that we think we needed, but it could have been a lot worse. So I'm appreciative of what we were able to get, and confident that moving forward we can fill positions as necessary.
Okay, since this is a public hearing, Mr. Sinesi, you have a comment?
Yeah, I just want to say I agree with the sentiment that everyone's working off of. I do think next year will be a challenging year for the teachers and students when the kids go back. So, obviously in subsequent budgets, I think the faster we can put those pieces in place for the special needs and for the math specialists, because I fear that we will see some regressions next year and just the needs for enhanced services. So the quicker we can do that, the better. But obviously we all understand why we can't do that right now. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Nelson.
Yeah, just a quick comment. It's pretty much all been said. We had requests for 22 new positions this year. And of course, we could never meet all of those requests. The nurses took up 3 of those requests, and I think this is the year to add the nurses. I think we're really going to need them going forward with what we're dealing with from the health standpoint. Hopefully next year, if things settle down, we can start to address the special needs requests. I was kind of hopeful that we could do that this year, but unfortunately it's just not the year to push for it. So the 3.75 guideline we've met, and as Tom pointed out, no one asked us to lower that amount. Thankfully, I don't think we could have done it. So I'm in favor of the budget. I want to thank, as Eric did already, I want to thank Ways and Means. As a former member, I know how hard they work, and they press us. They press Nicole. I want to thank Nicole for all her hard work. It's not easy putting together a $55+ million budget and then answering questions on some very specific items. And Nicole did a great job getting the information to the Ways and Means Committee. Hopefully they'll vote to approve our budget unanimously. I'm hopeful, and that the town meeting will support us this year. And I just want to thank everyone that worked hard, Bob also, and Eric, and everyone who worked on the budget. Thank you.
Okay, Kristen.
It's again, I just want to reiterate some of the comments and just thank the teachers for giving us a little bit of certainty with this budget for this year in a time that we are not certain on many things. I want to thank Nicole and the administration that have worked so hard while they've been dealing with the COVID situation, the closing in other areas, the Ways and Means and town administration with their proactiveness and their work with us also to move the budget. Having sat through the budget for a number of years now and seeing these requests come through and still not make it to the budget is disheartening. This is a different year though, and it's understood, but moving forward, hopefully we'll be able to see some of that as we move forward being put into that budget, especially the special ed. It's wonderful we have the nurses. This is the year to have them. We will need them as we go back and try and bring our schools back online fully. But there will be other positions moving forward that we will still need to keep on the forefront and look for ways at points to bring them through. But for this year, as Martha said, this is the right budget. This is the right things to have in it. And we appreciate everything that the town and Ways and Means and town meeting will be doing as we move forward. So thank you.
Okay, I'll just make a brief comment also. Thank you to Nicole, Ways and Means, Eric, Bobby, everyone. Under the circumstances, I think we have really little choice but to be glad that we're able to come in at 3.75 because it could have been a whole lot worse given the situation. If it had been a typical year, I think I would have had a difficult time with leaving out all of those positions, which is why I wasn't in favor of the guideline to start with, and why I think the committee in general did not take a vote on the guideline. Moving forward, I think we're going to have possibly some needs next year that we're not aware of as a result of this COVID-19 situation. And hopefully we can all work together with Ways and Means in the town side, as we've done so well. And thank you to the town side for being there for us. But I think we may have some unexpected expenses next year as a result of what we're going through right now. I noticed before I close the public hearing, there's a question from Liz DiTucci asking if the budget can be viewed online. Oh, and Nicole just answered it. Thank you very much, Nicole. Okay, I'd like to have a motion to close the public hearing if no one else has a comment.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing. Ms. Simon?
Aye.
Ms. Russo?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Nelson?
Aye.
Ms. Monaco votes aye. Public hearing is closed. And now I believe, Eric, you want a vote on the budget? Okay. Who's going to read the numbers?
Yes.
Kristen wants to do it.
I'm looking.
You have
I
it?
just had it. I just did.
I can do it if you.
All right, Martha. Mine's tiny.
Okay, so out here, but I'd like to move that we approve the fiscal 21 school budget salary account for $47,967,549.
Second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, Ms. Simon?
Aye.
Ms. Russo?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Abstain.
Mr. Nelson?
I abstain.
Ms. Monaco votes aye. That passes 302. The next item, Martha, you want to keep going? On the non-salary?
Yeah, I'd like to move that for the fiscal 21 school budget, non-salary items, non-salary expenses for $7,506,389.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, Ms. Simon?
Aye.
Ms. Russo?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Nelson?
Aye.
Mrs. Monaco votes aye. That's 500. And the combined total operating budget, Martha?
Need to take a vote on that as well?
Yes.
Okay. The combined fiscal 21 operating school budget, operating $55,473,908.
Second.
We've got some background noise going on. I don't know where it's coming from. I'm going to repeat that number. Martha just moved and Kristen seconded a total operating budget of $55,473,938. All those in favor, Ms. Simon?
Aye.
Ms. Russo?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Nelson?
Aye.
Mrs. Monaco votes aye. It's 500. And we have a budget.
And I move the special education accommodated budget as well.
Yes.
Okay, so I'd like to move for the fiscal year 21 special education accommodated budget, $12,615,139.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. To approve the special education accommodated account in the amount that Martha read. All those in favor, Ms. Simon,
Aye.
Ms. Russo,
Aye.
Mr. Murphy,
Dane,
Mr. Nelson,
Aye.
Ms. Monaco votes aye. That is 5-0-0. Dr. Conti,
A minute.
401, Chris.
I'm sorry?
40.
Oh, 401. Okay. Is that what you wanted to tell me, Eric? Yeah. Sorry, I misspoke on the vote. It was 401. Okay, now that's the end of what's on our agenda, I believe. But Dr. Conti, you want to revisit the warrant articles?
I do, just as part of the fiscal 21 budget. And I want to thank the committee at this point. It is a significant night in that this budget now is the school committee's budget. So all the staff, administration, and in the district will be working to support and present the school committee budget moving forward. So again, I want to thank the committee for taking that vote. Mr. Nelson mentioned the work that we've been doing with the town's financial team. And I think there were some concerns expressed at the Ways and Means Subcommittee and at the full Ways and Means meeting several weeks ago about the need for the town to hang on to some free cash. And free cash, as you all know, is the funding source for our capital warrant projects. So I think what was asked of us was for us to put together a sort of a tiered request list for the school committee. And we didn't really have a goal in mind for what those tiers would be, TIERS. And so the after meeting with the town's financial team, Mr. Sagarino, John D'Annunzio, Nicole, Bob, and I were there, and I think they wanted us to consider delaying. They all acknowledge that these are important projects, both on the town side and the school side, but they wanted us to work with the town and consider delaying, have the school committee consider delaying about $1 million of capital warrants as identifying $1 million. We would be responsible for 50% of that. So we would be responsible for $500,000 identifying, again, not an elimination, but a delay potentially of that. And then even going a little bit further to identify some other projects that that we may want to delay moving forward into the fiscal year. So again, Nicole and Bob are at that meeting. I just want to make sure that if I'm missing something or if they wanted something else represented, that they do so now.
Nicole?
I have nothing to add.
Bobby?
I also have nothing to add. Thank you.
Mr. Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've given a lot of thought to this request, and my first instinct was that perhaps we can find a way to go forward with all of our warrant articles. But giving it more thought, it's clear to me that these are very, very difficult times, and I think as a committee we ought to seriously consider postponing some of our warrant articles. The one that I'm looking at is the turf replacement at Varsity Field. That's a $500,000 expense. It's something that I think we could defer for a year. It would, I think, reduce the amount of free cash that the town has to use this year for warrant articles. And one of my concerns is giving some flexibility to the folks on the town side to use free cash. They don't normally use free cash for operating budgets, but this is a very special year. And when the selectmen are voting in November or early December on the tax levy and how much increase the taxpayers are going to face in the upcoming year, they may want to use some of the free cash. We're very fortunate in Burlington. We've got a little over $13 million right now in free cash. We have almost $9 million in the stabilization fund. But we want to, I think, give the selectmen a lot of flexibility because this is not a year where we want to see significant tax increases for the taxpayers in Burlington. So I think the committee should consider seriously deferring the varsity field turf replacement maybe until the January town meeting. And I personally wouldn't be opposed, although I haven't had a chance to discuss this with anybody else, but the Marshall Simons Auditorium project of $350,000, perhaps we could defer that for a year, and rather than do it over this particular summer, do it next summer. So that would free up $850,000 in free cash that the selectmen would have available to them in the fall to help to minimize the tax increase for the fiscal year. So those are just my thoughts. I think that I don't know what the committee feels about it. I think from conversations I've had, I think the turf replacement is an important project, but I don't think it's that serious a safety issue where we couldn't defer it until next summer rather than this summer. It's getting less use now anyway, and there are probably ways to service the field. Maybe we can put a little more of the infill in there to take care of some spots that might not be up to the standards that we would expect. But I wouldn't want to defer the other warrant articles. I think they're important. I don't think they're that significant from a cost standpoint, and most of them are safety related. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Mr. Murphy, have you got comments?
I would agree with everything Steve said, and I would support his suggestions to the degree. If I understood the superintendent, the town was looking for $1 million reduction in warrant articles, half and half. If we take the field out, that's our half. I'm more than willing to contribute more if circumstances require it. But I think that's something we can look at moving forward, and just as we talk about it with the town side and the financial people. The one thing that I would, actually two things. One thing that I just want to make a point of on the field. Again, I have no problem with delaying it, but just a couple of things we should be aware of. From what I'm reading and what I'm hearing, the hit from this current COVID situation that we're going through is expected to hit even worse next year and potentially even the year after that. So some of these larger ticket items, might not just be a 1 year extension. We might be looking at potentially a 2 or 3 year extension, depending on how things shape out as they go forward. So that's something to be aware of. And on the, I've heard talk about the optics, spending that kind of money in the field right now, given everything that's going on. And certainly there's something to be said for that. But I just want to remind everybody, which I think we're aware of, that this is a very valuable asset that the town put a lot of money into 10 odd years ago. And we do have a responsibility to maintain all the assets that are under our control. And I just don't want to get in a situation where by delaying something, it goes from one level of necessary rehabilitation to going to a full HAB replacement that would significantly increase the ultimate cost of the project. So from what I understand and from what I've looked into, I'm confident that we're not at that point with the field right now. But I just kind of caution everybody as we look 2 or 3 years down the road, if that's how long this is going to be delayed, that we should give some thought to that. And Dr. Conti touched on this, it might have been in the Ways and Means meeting a week or two ago. We were under very similar financial situation, not social situation, but financial situation back in 2008. And that's roughly when the Memorial School came online, the project. And because of the financial situation that the whole world was in at that point, at least the country, we got a very good price on the building. It came in under budget and a very low interest rate. So, given that scenario, as we're looking down the road a year or two here, it might be a good time to be bonding projects. And So some larger ticket items, maybe they can be grouped together and put into a bond with very minimal interest rates and probably a good bidding environment over the next year or two as people try to dig out from the hole that they're all falling into over the next few months. So I just throw that out there rather than maybe kicking this over as a warrant article 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road. Maybe we try to identify, and we could combine it with the town, identify a couple of larger ticket warrant articles and combine them into a bond if the bonding schedule allows for it. But having said all that, I agree with Steve's suggestion. Eric, I don't know if they were looking for a vote tonight or just the sense of the committee, and we'll kind of play it by ear as we get closer to the town meeting. But I would certainly be in favor of delaying the field as long as I can be assured that it's not going to create a safety issue. And I'd be willing to also postpone the auditorium for a year if that was required as well.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
A question to Mr. Murphy is I think as long as we sort of fulfill our initial commitment to the town, which was $1 million, and at a subsequent meeting, if you want us to put together some other scenarios, or if the town says they need more than that, again, we have several school committee meetings prior to town meeting. The mechanism for doing this, do you necessarily need to pull the warrant now, or could you pull it right on town meeting floor as well? So I'm not sure of the mechanism. So what would you suggest?
I think we can pull it on town meeting floor, sir. We can postpone it right up to a vote. So I think as long as we, and I'll see what the rest of the committee has to say, but if it's the will of the committee that there's that we're okay with certainly holding off on the field, which covers our requested $500,000 contribution to the cuts. And also, if it's the will of the committee that we'd entertain further cuts, potentially on the auditorium article, then we can kind of have discussions with Paul and the town side moving forward. And I'm not sure we necessarily have to take a vote right now, other than let them know that we're willing to do at least the field and maybe more if need be. It might be that as we're getting closer to town meeting, they're looking at things that come in this thing. They might say that's not necessary. The field will be fine. So I rather than commit to something at this point over and above what we've been asked to do, I'd rather kind of hold off on that part of it and see how things shape out between now and town meeting.
Okay, Mr. Nelson.
Yeah, Chris, just a point of order. I think that what we've done in the past is we've posted a public meeting the same night as town meeting for like a half an hour before town meeting in one of the little science rooms. And we just take a vote. If we decide we want to pull the article, we just take a vote at that point in time. So we can wait right up until the last minute. I think the town would like to get a sense of the committee as to what we're going to do. But we could just have Sharon post a meeting. And if we decide, or if the town asks us to do a little bit more than the field, then we can just vote on it that night right before town meeting.
I agree. I agree we should wait until town meeting before pulling articles. In fact, I would prefer it, rather than remove them, that we vote to postpone to a date certain, for instance, the January town meeting. So that's where I'm headed. Bobby, you wanted to say something?
Yes, please. If I could just comment, thank you to the chair. In regards to the middle school auditorium, I want people to recognize that there is an asbestos concern and also safety rigging concern for the lights and the curtains that are in there. So I do realize that's a large sum, but if we were looking to reduce that particular warrant article, I would prefer to not remove it, but maybe reduce it. I do have some other articles that I would put on the chopping block for that, that I would not consider a safety, like the middle school auditorium was. So like I said, I just wanted to comment on that. People could consider that. Thank you.
Okay, Bob, why don't you, we're not going to vote on this tonight anyway. Why don't you put together your priorities of, if we're forced to do more than postpone the field, what you would put after that, and just tell us at another meeting. Kristen, did you have a comment?
Yes, with regard to the field, I was happy to hear what Tom said about thinking about keeping it on there when down the line and really not letting it go too far. That the field gets a lot of use, granted not right now, but it gets a lot of use from the adult leagues too. So you have a lot stronger play on that field than you do the other plays. And right now, the middle school field is in better shape. So it's nice that we have that ability. So people are requesting the middle school field to play on more so for different things than the high school field. I know a number of the high school teams prefer the middle school field. So it is starting to get worn down. And the two athletic fields, also turf fields, give us the ability to rest our other grass fields. They're able to be used. So while the number fits and I'm in favor of keeping that off the warrant and postponing it, it is something I would like to see still there and not fall by the ways that we've seen with the other department requests that we just talked about with the budget hearing that we keep seeing over and over and they don't get put in. So that field does play an integral part, not just for our high school athletics, but for a lot of the adult leagues and other leagues in town. So it's important that we keep that there. Thank you.
Okay, Martha, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm also I think I'd be most likely to support maybe postponing the varsity field replacement. It is something that isn't getting a lot of use right now, and will, but I want to be sure it doesn't get then kicked down the road too long. I'm not sure we need to wait until the night. I think it's good to post a meeting before town meeting in case there are things we need to decide, but I don't feel the need to wait till that night. I think if we can have that conversation earlier, that's, in my opinion, that's probably preferable. And also I would like to see what Bob's other suggestions are for ways we could shave some money off of our requests for the capital warrant articles or for postponements. And in terms of the middle school auditorium, I'm not, I had also wondered if we could maybe shave some part of it off, but I definitely want to make sure we do some of it, at least the big chunks that were safety issues. There also was a question about, somebody mentioned the netting for safety issues, but the netting is actually something that's on the high school stage auditorium. So that's a separate warrant article not included in the middle school warrant. So that was a little thing I wanted to clear up. Thank you.
Okay, so I had the conversation with Paul Sagarino about the possibility of bonding. If we have a high school project going forward next year, of rolling some other things if we're forced to postpone them into that bond. And although he did not sound enthusiastic at the moment, he did say it was possible and we would look into it. My position is that we wait and find out where the town is at, where Mr. Sagarino and Mr. Denizio really want us to go and where the selectmen want us to go when we get closer to town meeting. I agree that the field we could postpone to a date certain without a problem. I would wait for Bob and Eric to give us recommendations on other projects because I think they're the best judges of what can wait and what can't wait. I would just say that the one thing I don't want to postpone is the water filling stations at the middle school because I don't like the idea with all the sickness of kids drinking out of bubblers. So we've had the conversation. Thank you, Steve, for your thoughts of where we should go with this in the beginning. And Eric, you wanted to talk about funding for something that would fit in to the warrant articles from earlier in the meeting?
No,
The science labs.
No, the science labs was connected to the design work at the high school, separate from this. Ms. Monica, what I wanted to do is we typically don't review or go back over the capital warrant articles once you voted and approved them if we've met the budget. So what I was asking is if we could sort of in an atypical way, readdress the capital warrants, because we had already narrowed down our capital warrants to the $1.6 million figure that we had been originally given. Again, what I was asking for as an exception was the town had asked us to make a reduction in that, or at least to consider making a reduction in that for town meeting. And again, we didn't have a target. They gave us a target this week. And again, the high school field allows us at least to meet the initial target. And I agree, that's not going to be the last conversation we have. We're speaking with the town's financial team weekly, and we will put together sort of a tier 2 recommendation for the committee. And if they're coming in recommending further cuts, we'll certainly let the committee know. Or if they want to stay where they are, we can let the committee know. I was just concerned if we had a deadline to make that adjustment. But Mr. Murphy, you're saying we can make that adjustment up until the night of town meeting. So I was just concerned I was gonna miss something. So we have lots more conversations to have before June 10th. But I think the town financial team, Paul and John, would welcome the committee's flexibility. I think, Mr. Nelson, you put it very well that you all work very well with the selectmen, and I think they're just looking for a little bit more flexibility. And I think Ways and Means was asking for that as well during their full meeting, and I'm assuming the subcommittee would concur. So I just wanted to thank the committee for your flexibility, and I don't think this is going to be our last conversation on this topic moving forward.
So Eric, can you, I'm confused about the money to design science labs. Where will it come from?
We have an existing warrant for $100,000 for bid documents for the boilers, so we can go out to bid for the HVAC system. So that money we have. The $100,000 is almost seed money if we need the architectural firm to do other design work for us. One of the things might be, as you said, a recommendation about Pine Glen. One of the recommendations could be some ideas about Fox Hill. Another one of those recommendations could be looking at if we're going to tear all the ceilings out of the high school to replace the ductwork for the HVAC. Again, I'm way out of my area of expertise. We can look at your labs at that point, and we can do some preliminary design work for that $100,000. Mr. Nelson's point, though, is that if we end up spending, and please, I'm just using this number, $20 million to do the HVAC and to do some upgrades at the high school, the design work that's going to go with that is going to be much more expensive than $100,000. It might be up to, again, say 10% of the project. So it could be $2 million. So we would have to go back and ask town meeting to have this firm put bid documents out that a construction company could then bid on. So the $100,000 is honestly just money for them to begin the conversation with us and to make some recommendations. If they're going to do more detailed work or prepare bid documents, I think it's going to get much more expensive quickly.
Okay, just want to make sure that we stay, in line with everything we're supposed to do. Is there anything else Martha?
I just want to clarify again what Eric just said. We have a $100,000 warrant article that is open now that was voted on last May. That's for the HVAC system at the high school. But we also have a $100,000 warrant article that we're proposing to town meeting in May for additional design work. And that's where we would be able to get the bid documents or the design work for the other things we've talked about tonight, like science labs and Pine Glen and things like that. Is that understanding correct?
Again, I think we could have preliminary conversations. What I just want to be clear on is I have no idea what bid documents for science labs would cost. My belief is they would be far greater than $100,000, but $100,000 would at least get them to say, this is what it's going to cost, and then we could go to town meeting. When we went to the Memorial School, there were several votes of town meeting. One was for just the cost to pay the KBA to prepare design documents, right? So I think that was several $1,000,000 just for that vote before we voted on the construction funding for the documents once designed. So again, it's just very initial seed money to do that.
Okay. That's available through this second $100,000 warrant, capital warrant article that we're asking for this year.
If approved, yes.
Okay. Anyone have anything else to come before the committee tonight, Martha?
Yes, I have two sort of housekeeping issues maybe. One is that we voted on we now have a school committee budget. We have voted on it. And Nicole posted the link to it here. And I just want to know, is that a link to our working budget that we've been working on that is not the same total number as, I guess my question is probably to Nicole, is the link you provided a link to a budget that shows what we just voted on tonight?
Yes and no. So it includes everything that was requested by all the departments. What we've done in prior years is that we've also added the additional sheet that shows the reduction to guidelines. So that will be added in the coming days.
Okay, so because I know people are going to start looking at it. So you think, I don't know, today's Tuesday, you think by Friday it would be available?
I don't make the changes to the website, but we'll aim for Friday.
Okay, and likewise, whoever does, I'm looking at you, Patrick. But if we could make sure that these are posted in under the school committee, under district, under financial office, so that people have these reductions in guideline. And just to clarify that the full document is the document we've been working on, which was way over the 3.75% guideline. But if you take the guideline, the budget reduction sheet that will be posted alongside of it, that shows the reductions out of that full budget. But it allows people to continue to have access to any of the details that they want to see. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay, and my other question is something I raised at the last meeting. Mrs. Monaco, if I could, I had raised the question of whether we voted on a warrant, and those used to typically need all of our signatures. And we had talked about whether it would be possible to vote during the closure or during the duration of this COVID-19 pandemic, that we vote that one signature would be satisfactory. And I was wondering if somebody found out if that's legal and how we would go about doing that.
Martha, we actually voted on that last time, and Sharon and I are working that out.
Perfect. Good. Okay. Because we voted on another warrant, so I hadn't. Okay, so we did. Good. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Does anyone else have anything to come before the committee? Eric, we done?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. Good night, everyone. Thank you for being here.
All in favor?
Good night.
All in favor?
Bye.
Aye.
Well, all right, roll call.
Okay.
Martha.
Miss aye.
Kristen.
Bye.
Tom.
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
Chairman votes aye. We are adjourned.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.